Hello, hello, hello. Trying to find it. There it is. I can see it. Hey guys, what's going on tonight? And no, it's going to take a few minutes for everybody else to join in because it's a different profile going live because Dave is going to be teaching us tonight. Woot, woot. Kind of excited to have a little co-host going on. And yeah, so anything that you guys have questions or comments about as far as the VisualWRAP is concerned, try to get those kind of like typed out in the initial part of it so that as Dave's going through it, I can kind of interject them into it. Do want to give you guys a shout out. Thank you all for your support. Hi, Michael, for buying the thread for me to be able to get a bigger booth at the expo next year. I really appreciate the amount of love that I've received. And seriously, thank you. Because now I can expand what I'm trying to do and not go bankrupt. So appreciate all that. But also on that note, if you need some, I've got thread. So, you know, $1 full. Come buy it if you haven't already. But as I was saying, so Dave's going to be presenting VisualWRAP. And if you have questions, we sent out kind of this questionnaire a little bit earlier today, but I'm sure it got missed because of timing when it was dropped and everything. But type them out. I'm following it on Facebook, and so I can ask the questions to him in real time. We don't know how this StreamYard setup's going to work, if he's going to be able to see the comments or not. So we're just kind of relying on me feeding off of what's going on my phone, and hopefully it picks up what you guys are saying, and it's not just telling me that people are watching. Okay. So Dave, where's your lovely face at tonight? There he is.
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you and see you. Can
you understand the accent?
I love the accent. The accent is my favorite, actually. Like a good Australian accent. Nice.
Thank you for inviting me on tonight, Mary. It's quite a privilege to be on the Wrap Wednesday on Southern. So yeah, I'm happy to be here.
You're welcome. I figured the best person to educate them on VisualWRAP would be the man who wrote the program. So thought that would be nice.
Thank you. And when I started getting into building rods like 20 something years ago, I thought what I need is a killer tool to help me build better rods. And so I was interested in software and programming. So I wrote some code and managed to create VisualWRAP. And I thought this is going to be my secret weapon to let me build better rods. And to be honest, I've been so busy just supporting the software and people who use it for the last 20 years. I haven't had any time to build rods. So sort of a bit counterproductive for me, but hopefully productive enough for everyone else.
I know I personally love it, especially the pattern packs, the extra stuff that was put out, because all those patterns are like the modifications to the previous patterns in the original. And I particularly like all those. I flipped through the books and I'm always like, man, which one?
Yeah, the interesting thing I found is into the VisualWRAP software, we've built a coding engine, a scripting language, and I thought everyone would go out and write their own patterns. And I forgot that not everyone is a computer programmer.
I'm not.
20 years ago when it was launched, hardly anyone was using a computer, and especially the demographic of people using into custom rods back then, it was typically retired men who didn't know which hands to use holding a mouse. So I sort of missed the target there. As a result, 20 years later, it's suddenly popular.
Well, and everything's the computer age now. Like we have our computers in our phones and all that. Chris says, hey, all, can't stay long, but we'll be able to rewatch. Can it be saved doing it this way? Yeah, as far as we know, Chris, it should save to Facebook. We did testing in a previous secret group you guys can't know about, but just trying to see what it was going to do. And so far it plays. So fingers crossed. Worst case scenario, I'm going to immediately save it after we get done and we'll be straight. So Dave, tell us a little bit about like the beginning, like if you were to introduce visual wrap to somebody, what's
Yeah.
the kind of like, other
Sure.
than it being a visual aid and it's fantastic for that, like what are some of the other like awesomeness things that they do?
Yeah, sure. So the thing that I found back in the day when I started, I picked up a copy of Clement's custom rod thread art, and I was instantly hooked. I made one or two patterns, wrapped them on my rod, and I thought, this is amazing. And I don't know why. I don't know why it was so fascinating to me, but I realized very quickly it takes a long time is one thing. And so if you start doing a pattern, it takes a long time before you realize, hang on, I don't like how it's sized on my rod, or I don't like the colors, or I don't like, just the proportions that are there. That was one instant problem I saw. And the other thing was I really struggled to visualize how it was going to look on the rod compared to the pictures in the book, because the book was just a two-dimensional, layout of either a drawing or some craft paper that has been cut into strips. And you sort of had to bend your brain around, okay, if that gets curled around a rod, it's going to look like this. So the idea with VisualWRAP is to very quickly be able to select a pattern that you think you might like or your customer might like, test the colors on that pattern, very quickly change thread colors, and then work out how many pattern repeats are going to look good on your rod. You can print out the pattern true to size. So once it's printed out, wrap it around your rod, and within 5 minutes, you can have a mock-up of the pattern on your rod. And to me, that tool is time-saving, and it helps me make decisions about what pattern I do or don't want on my rod. So that's because sometimes the decisions you make saying no, I don't want that, are the most important ones, because
Yes, I know. I should probably. I know that I've heard you say that you can print it out and just do. And I'm sitting here going, why have I never done that? Because I always do everything the hard way. So yeah, that'd be nice to be able to just print it out to where it's supposed to be, and just doom doom doom, and you're ready to go. Like
and so tonight I'll demonstrate that in real time, printing out true to size and marking off on the blank, and that will give people another option with using the software. We've also got the spacing tables in there, but there are some assumptions built into that. And with the spacing table, it assumes that your pattern is square.
Yeah.
The thing that I've found in trying to understand cross wraps in order to write the software correctly is they get very complicated very quickly. Yes. And so I had to make a lot of assumptions along the way. And like any sort of communication, it's sometimes really hard communicating all those assumptions. So I know that the spacing table assumes that your pattern is square, but not everyone does that. And not everyone, I would say of 100 people who have bought the software, I would guess that maybe 5 people have read the help file that comes with it that explains, the ins and outs. Because these days, it's not how people learn, which is fair enough. There's different mediums for learning as we're discovering. So that's why I'm super excited to be on tonight, to maybe show some people and demonstrate how those features work, and hopefully you can get a better idea of sort of what comes second nature to me.
Lori said, David, you were ahead of your time with your program. I think you was too, Lori. I think you was too.
Thank you. I appreciate the comment. Actually, Laurie, I think these days you're ahead of your time with the skill you demonstrate in wrapping your awesome wraps. Your selection of colors, your pattern selections, they're unreal. I just love seeing the patterns you post. It blows me away. And to me, that's the most wonderful thing about the software. It's the people I've met along the way, and it's the awesome patterns that have been generated. I mean, you just can't beat it. When I bought the Clemens book 20-something years ago, the book was already like 20 years old. So I thought, this is the dying art. And, I didn't know any rod builders when I started. There was, in the back of the book, there was an address in Allentown, was it, to send a mail if you wanted to join rod crafters and, you know, be involved with the craft. So I sent a letter, and that was back 20 years ago. Didn't get a response, and so I didn't know if rod crafters was still a thing or not.
Oh no!
I mean, back then we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have social media.
Yeah,
you know, you had bulletin boards, you had email was just starting to become a thing. So I thought, well, if I don't do it, maybe no one will do it, and this thing's going to die. And I don't know why, but I love it. So I got stuck into it, and it took me 5 years. It took me 5 years part time. You know, I'd do my day job. I'd come home. I'd work half the night for 5 years in a row, and I sacrificed a lot to do that. And in hindsight, don't know if I'd do it again, but I've done it now. So
you were younger.
Here we are today. We've got a tool, and I'm proud to say this software has been out for 20 years, still on the original version. It's still supported by the author, and it's still running as strong today as it's probably running stronger today than when it was released, because computers are faster now, and so that the code runs faster. So I'm happy to say that it's still kicking.
Awesome. Lori said, thanks. I'm looking for the next inappropriate wrap. And then John Gaff says, hi, everyone. Hal said, hey, Mary and David, finally found how to comment here. Sorry, I know it's a little different setup than we're used to, but we feel like it's a better presentation, and instead of like us being stacked on top of each other and then not being able to see what David's going to present later on. So thanks for bearing with us. Anyways, Dave, back to you.
No worries. Well, I'm happy to sort of get underway with showing my stuff on the screen. I'm happy to share my screen and talk through things. If people have questions along the way, please post them in the comments section. I can see them on the side, but I'll be so concentrating on what to say next and how to manipulate the screen that I'll rely on Mary to read them out to me. And we may jump around a bit in terms of topics that we cover. What I hope to cover tonight, just to give you an overview, is first of all the basics of the software. Get you familiar with the user interface, like what to expect on the screen, what the various buttons do, and how to interpret what you can see on the screen. So that's the first thing. Then I'll go into what a script is and working with scripts. A lot of people ask, how do I write my own scripts? So I'll go into that. It may explode your mind a little bit if you're not into that sort of thing, but it's good sometimes just to see other people do it, even if it's not your cup of tea. So I'll go into scripts. I can work on writing a very simple script from scratch, and then we'll see where that leads. I'll show how to go from seeing the pattern on the screen to laying it out on your rod. That's probably the number one question I get along the way. So I'll demonstrate that, and then if there are other questions that come up, happy to help.
Awesome.
So with no further ado, I'll press a button and hopefully it should show my screen.
Mark says he still can't get his VisualWRAP program to work. He's tried many times, but he just ends up cutting strips of paper.
Sure. Well, I guess that's a tried and true method, but I'm happy to, if people contact me, I'm happy to log onto their machine remotely and help them get it set up.
What email do you want them to message you on Facebook or send you an email? What's easier for you?
Either way, David Boyle at VisualWRAP.com is what I normally answer to. So it's David Boyle at VisualWRAP.com. There's also the thread, the VisualWRAP users group on Facebook, and that's a great place to post your questions, because if I don't get to it in time, other people do, other users of the software do. So feel free to reach out to either the Facebook users group, VisualWRAP users group on Facebook, or David Boyle at VisualWRAP.com.
Hal asked if there's any way that you can use the program or just like an iPad or a tablet.
At the moment, it needs to be running Windows. So if you want to use an iPad, you would need to run an emulator, Windows emulator like Parallels. It does work on parallels. You've got to buy parallels though, and probably buy a Windows license that goes with it. But that is an option if you're that way inclined. On a tablet, so long as the tablet is running Windows. Okay, so when you launch VisualWRAP, this is the first screen you see. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to work out how to turn off my name. Just bear with me, because otherwise, you know what the name is. It's going to hide part of the screen. So just bear with me for a second.
Wes, you'll get a step-by-step on coding in a little bit, I promise.
We'll get there. Right. Okay, so from the splash screen or the opening screen, this is what you see. And it's divided into a number of sections. So at the top, you have a menu bar. You have a text menu. You also have some nice pictures on buttons. You have these colors, and these colors represent spool colors. So basically spools of thread that you want to work with. This top half of the screen is called the flat view, and that shows where the pattern threads are going to be laid. And down the bottom, we have at the moment showing the pattern script. That's the like the coding window where the pattern will be loaded in a computer programming version that VisualWRAP understands. So what I'm going to start by doing is I'm going to load a very simple single cross pattern and put it onto the flat view. And then I'm going to show it in 3D. So I'll make that bigger so you can see it, and I'll just stop it there. So I'd like you to conceptualize this 3D pattern has been sliced along the back and laid out flat, and that's your flat view. And if I swap my camera again, hopefully you can see me. So yes. Imagine that was the pattern that was wrapped on the rod. And if I take a pair of scissors and cut that and lay that out flat, that is what you see at the top of your VisualWRAP screen. I've only shown a single pattern repeat here, so a single cross. But if it was 2 pattern repeats, it would be this long. If it was 3 pattern repeats, it would be this long. And that's what you can see when I flick back to my screen here. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense and explains the relationship between the flat view and the 3D window. Anything that's shown on the flat view, when you hit the 3D viewer, gets shown in 3D. So this number 1 means 1 pattern repeat. So if I increase that and show 2 and go wrap, that will show 2 pattern repeats. And here's one of those assumptions that I made. I assumed that everything was going to be square. And in fact, this is not quite square because those threads don't cross at right angles. So it's not exactly 2 pattern repeats. But if it was a square pattern, it would be. If I hit it again, that will show basically 3 pattern repeats. And then if I hit 3D, as I said, anything that's shown on the flat view, once I hit 3D, gets sent to your 3D viewer. And your buttons on your 3D viewer might look slightly different. If they do, if you right-click and go Preferences and go to Skin, choose the CAD-like skin, because that's the most intuitive set of buttons that I've found. Say OK. This bottom,
taking notes.
This bottom button will fit the rod to your screen. And then if you click on the handle, that will stop it spinning. If you click on the background, if you click on the pattern, the background will cycle through a predetermined set of colors for the background. I prefer the gray. It gives the best contrast between the rod and most patterns. So clicking the handle stops the spinning. Clicking just above the handle will start the spinning. And then if you click and drag anywhere in the background, you can move the rod around. And that might just help you visualize what it's going to look like from various different angles.
Nice. I didn't know all that.
No worries. Okay. You can also maximize that window and fit it if you wanted to fill your screen with a 3D viewer. Just remember to minimize it again afterwards. You can get into a state once you've maximized it and you click on something else, you can then lose the minimize button and you basically have to restart the program to get it happy again. But anyway, that's the basic functionality of the 3D viewer. Right. So let's load a pattern. So I'm going to clear the pattern that's there, and I'm going to show my script window. So this second button along is the script window, these series of lines. You can also go to Window Script, and that will show the pattern script window. So this is where VisualWRAP loads the script or the set of instructions which tells it where to wrap things, where to put threads, what color threads to use, what angles to lay those threads at, and how many passes to make. So if let's do it like this. I'll put myself back on camera for a second. We have these pattern pack books that we've printed out. So these basically represent all of the patterns that are available either in your standard pattern library, and this is the standard one. Standard pattern library has approximately 100 patterns in it, and the pattern packs 1 to 4. Each pattern pack has about 150 patterns in it, and this is a printout of all of those patterns. So say you had either the standard pattern library or the pattern packs, and you wanted to do a new wrap for your latest rod. So what you would do is you would flick through the printed images, or if you have the PDFs, you can scroll through the PDF on your machine and decide which one you like. And I'm thinking this one catches my eye. So that happens to be what number is that? 2121 Spider Fire Shaded. Okay, so it's pattern 2121. So I'll go back into VisualWRAP now. Not that screen, this one. I'll go back and I'll look for pattern 2121. So I'll go open. I don't want to save the current pattern. I do want to clear it. And I'll go into my pattern packs, and it was 2121. So I go into here, because it's 2121 falls between those two numbers. I go in and I find 2121. I picked the wrong range. 2121, this range. Sorry, I can't count. They say there's 3 types of people in this world: those who can count and those who can't. And 2121 was the one I was looking for. Hang on. Right. So I've loaded 2121, and you might be thinking, well, where is it? Well, it's actually there. It's been loaded into the pattern script window, and this set of instructions is called a pattern script. You don't need to know what it means unless you're quite advanced and you want to tweak the pattern. But basically, these lines of instructions tell the software what threads to use, what layouts to use, where to place them, what angles to place them at, and how many times to repeat laying them down on the rod. And lo and behold, if you hit wrap, what VisualWRAP will do is follow those instructions and show you a pattern on the screen. And as I said, we hit 3D, it'll show you that pattern spinning on a 3D rod. And going back to wrapping, when I hit wrap, VisualWRAP wrapped it as quickly as it could. So it probably took, 0.2 of a seconds to wrap that because I've got a reasonably fast laptop. If I hit the delay button, I can hit clear. And then when I hit wrap, VisualWRAP will put a slight delay between each thread. So it will lay a thread down and then it will pause for a fraction of a second. Then it will lay the next thread and pause for a fraction of a second, and so on. And that gives you an idea of how the pattern develops, because that was one of the major tasks I set myself, was to have it so that you could see how the pattern developed. Because it's one thing to see what the layout threads are and what the finished pattern is, but understanding how that pattern develops is really important, because when you're halfway through the wrap, it might look nothing like the finished wrap. And I've been 3/4 of the way through a pattern and thought I must have done something wrong because it doesn't even look like a star or a circle or a heart that I'm trying to wrap. But, you lay the last few passes and suddenly it jumps into existence and you think, oh, I was right all along. So the software very quickly lets you see it and see it at every stage. You can even do it in single mode. So if I go single and go clear, what I'm going to do, though, is just quickly change the background color to white, go clear, just so we can see black threads going down. Now that I'm in single mode and I hit wrap, it says use the next button. So it will lay a set of threads every time I hit next. So if I go 1, 2, 3, it lays 3 threads, 1, 2, 3, and so on. The more times I hit next, the more threads go down. And you can stop, you can pause, you can think, you can compare it with what's on your rod, and that's what the next button is for using single mode. You can swap between modes. I'm halfway through the wrap, but I'm going to go into delay mode now. And then, I'm 3/4 of the way through the wrap, and I'm now going to go into auto mode, and it quickly finishes it. So those are the 3 different modes for wrapping the pattern.
Dave.
Yes.
Dakota Standards would like to know, what do you mean by passes?
Okay, very good. So when you, let me start a new wrap. I'm going to go new. Do I want to save this pattern? No, I don't. Do I want to clear the pattern script? Yes, I do. I'm going to just call this new pattern. Okay, and patterns are made up of different sections. So I'm going to call this section number 1. Okay, and up pops this thing called a script builder. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a layout. And by a layout, I mean a standard configuration of threads. It could be a single, and it's like a building block. Think of a layout as being like a building block. So the basic building blocks are threads. One going in this direction, which I'm going to call up, because it's going towards the up side of my screen. But if you're wrapping left to right, it's also going up the rod, where the tip end is the up end of the rod. It could be a thread going down. It could be a combination of 2 threads. So that's a cross. It could be a combination of 2 crosses, which is a box. They are the basic building blocks that I've built into the software. And with any combination of those building blocks, you can come up with any pattern that your imagination can come up with. So if I start with a cross, let's set this thread to a certain color. So if I go here, I'll select a spool. I'm going to make it this orange color, spool 5. And let's make this up thread a different spool color. We'll make it yellow, spool 7. So we've got a yellow and an orange. I need to place that pattern building block or layout somewhere on the screen. Now, you should be able to see a set of coordinates appearing when I move my mouse around. What I had to do was come up with a way of describing where to lay threads. And the only way I could think of doing it sensibly was to set up a grid pattern. And I set up a grid pattern of 0 to 100 in both the horizontal and vertical orientations on the flat view. So if you think of this as being a grid going from 0 to 100 on the x-axis and 0 to 100 on the y-axis, that's how we tell VisualWRAP where to place things. So if I want to place something in the middle of that, I would use 50-50 because 50 is half of 100. So we go 50-50. And when we talk about passes, once we've got a layout, that's the first set of threads that go down. The way that we build up a pattern is by repeatedly putting down that same thread layout, but each time slightly varying where it's going to be placed relative to the last time, and also possibly varying the number of threads we use in that layout. So to keep it simple, I'm going to move this cross up the rod. So I'm going to use this right-hand arrow, and I'm going to use a single band of threads each time. I'll start with one band of threads, and I'm going to make 15 passes. So I'll type 15. So Dakota, the question about passes, I'll use the next button to demonstrate that. So by making these selections, we've created this line of script. We're going to add that or append it to the current pattern. So we use this append button, say append, that adds this line of script. I'm going to put it into single mode. I'm going to say wrap. So it says use the next button to lay the threads. So I'll say, okay, hit next. That's what I call my first pass. It's the first complete set of layout threads. And what we've told the software to do is make 15 sets of these passes, and each time progress it to the right. So that's one pass. That's two passes, three passes, 4, 5, etc. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So it's done what we've told it to do. It's used that layout. It's put it in the center of the screen. It's used the colors we've told it. It's gone up the rod to the right-hand side, like we've told it, and it's done it 15 times. So that's 15 passes that it has made. Hopefully that explains what a pass is. What you might also find is that at the same time as doing that layout, you might want to do another layout. So I'm going to set up 2 black threads, and I'm going to start them just to the left of where we started before. Well, rather than type it in, how about I place it there? So I've clicked the place button, and then I move my mouse, and it tells me, it gives me a ghost image of where to place the threads. So basically I want it to go hard up against where I started before. I basically know it's 49.50. So I'll click when I get to 49.50. And this time, instead of going up the rod, we'll go down the rod. And again, we'll make 15 passes. And I'll append that. So now, when I hit, I'll do it in delay mode, so you don't have to watch me clicking. It does everything in a sequential order. It's like a, think of a racetrack that's been set up. This section is a racetrack, And as we go around the racetrack, the first obstacle that you go past is this first layout. So you wrap that once. And the second obstacle you come to is this layout. And so you wrap that once. And so you've gone one loop around the racetrack. That's one full pass. So if you have more layouts in that section, one pass means one set of all of those layouts. Now, just to spice things up a little bit, we've assumed, or we've told the software to use a single band each time, starting with a single thread. This time, for the black that's going to the left, let's just put my mouse on that line. Let's, instead of using a band of threads, let's go use the +1 progression. And I will, at the moment it says band 1, but when I hit replace, it changes it to +1. So what that means is that on the first pass, because we're starting with one thread, beginning with one thread, there'll be one set of blacks that get laid down. On the second pass, there'll be one set of orange and yellows, but there'll be two sets of black. On the third pass, there'll be one set of orange and yellow, but there'll be three sets of black, etc. And what you'll see by using the plus, instead of having a nice straight interface here, what we'll end up with
making a two-colored scale
is something like that.
So Dave Vollmer wants to know, if you buy the pattern packs, how do you load them so the software can access them?
Sure. So the pattern packs are basically a set of text files. And when you purchase them and download them, they download as a zip file. The idea is you put that zip file onto your hard drive, and we should just pause that there.
It's wrapping over itself.
It's wrapping over itself because 15 passes at +1, it's a massive number of threads towards the end.
Yeah.
Basically, you purchase the pattern packs, you download them onto your machine, or if you contact me, I can help you with it. You then unzip the zip files that are sent. And if I very quickly show you on my hard drive, if I go to, this is not my normal computer that I use, so I'm just trying to find where it is. So I go to this PC, go to my C drive, go to Program Files x86, find my VisualWRAP folder. I just saw it and I hit my mouse. VisualWRAP. I go to Patterns. I create my own folder called Pattern Packs, and then I just copy from that zip file. I copy those folders of scripts into there, so that they are the individual scripts. They're coordinated into folders when you unzip them, and I just put all of those folders in this location. And what that means, by putting them, you can put them anywhere basically, as long as it's on the same drive, like C drive. By putting them under patterns, it means when you're using VisualWRAP, if I finish that, when you're using VisualWRAP, when I go to open a new pattern, it will remember where you loaded it last time. By default, it will open in the patterns area. And then I like to have a separation between my standard pattern library and my pattern packs. So if I go into pattern packs, it then just sees those files that I've copied onto my C drive, and you find the one you want, and you can load it. And if I go clear and wrap that, then that's how I organize the script files.
So Wes wanted to know, how do you have them do one set of instructions completely and then move on to the next one?
Okay, good question. And thank you for the question. So let me go back. New. I don't want to save this. Yes, I want to clear it. So I'm going to create a new pattern. I should have saved the last one that I was demonstrating, but
I didn't want to interrupt you in mid-sentence. So I was like, oh, okay. So we'll start over.
Right. So what we're going to do, we'll clear what's there because the script's no longer there. So we're going to start by doing a cross going outwards. So we'll go a red cross that starts in the middle, and we know that 50-50 is the middle. It's going to go outwards, and it's going to go a band of 1, and we're going to make 10 passes. 10, bend, right. At the same time, I'm going to do a box, and I'll change the color to something like this charcoal grey. And if 10 goes, if we're at 50 in the middle and we're going outwards 10, that would finish at 40. So if I want to end up at 40, I'd have to start at 30 if I'm still going to make 10 passes. So hopefully you followed my mental arithmetic there, but I'm going to start this left-hand coordinate at 30 and tell it to move inwards 10 times. And the right-hand coordinate is going to be 70. Because 70, if I start at 70 and come inwards 10, it's going to put me at 60. At the same time, I've got my red box coming outwards from 50 plus 10 is 60. So they're both going to meet at 60. So inwards append. Right. So if I wrap this, I messed that one up, didn't I? What did I do there? I know what I did. I can see here, if I launch my builder, I didn't set my Y coordinate properly. My Y coordinate was set as 0, so it was counting from the top of the screen instead of the middle. So 30, 50, 70, 50, replace. Okay, so that should work now. If I go clear, wrap. Okay, yay. So that's the pattern that's just been created. So the reds started in the middle and they went out 10, and the greys started out at 30 and they went in 10 and symmetrically opposite on the other sides. So that section wraps to completion. So that's like the car's gone around the race course. Each time it's come to these obstacles, it's done what the instruction told it to do. Now that we've finished that, we may well wish to do a background. If we simply put a line of background script here, it would try to wrap at the same time as the pattern, which is not what we want. Let's start by doing what we don't want, and then I'll show you how to change it. So for the background, let's pick another color for the background. What's a contrasting color? We'll choose this spool 8. So we'll go spool 8. Okay. So let's start that, and we're going to go outwards. And I'm not sure how many passes it's going to need. We'll start with 15, and I'll probably have to tweak it. So we're going to basically, I should start it a little bit less than the coordinate that the grey starts at. So 29 and 71 going outwards. So we're going to just put a yellow box around the grey box, and we're going to move that outwards. So that's the outwards button. We're going to make 15 passes. I'm going to append that. So in my head, I'm thinking, yes, I've got this nice pattern that's formed. I now want to just fill in the background. And I have placed the background in the same section as the pattern. And I think, oh, this is going to be great. But what happens when I hit the wrap button? It all wraps at the same time. And it's still a nice pattern, but that's not what I had in mind. So what I really want to do is I want to wrap the first section to completion, and then coming here, I'm actually going to insert a new section. And I can just type the word section. And I'll call that background. Okay. Right. So now what's going to happen, I'll put it in delay. It will wrap the first part of the pattern that we know about, and that will do the 10 passes of the red and the black. And that will finish nicely. Then once that is finished, it will only then start on doing the background. And it's doing the background now, and that background is moving outwards. So the lesson to learn there is everything within a section gets wrapped sequentially, and the whole section needs to be completed before it moves on to the next section.
So
Sorry, go ahead.
Penny said, I need to buy this. And Wes said, oh, Mary's about to hate life.
What I was saying before is I wasn't sure how many background threads I would need. I guessed 15. Let's make it, I can come in here, instead of 15, let's type 20. And then when I hit, I'll make it auto so it's quick. Let's see what that looks like. Still not enough. Let's make it 30. 30 it is. So let's have a look at that in more detail. And let's look at that on the 3D rod. If I hit the background. So that's what it's going to look like on my rod. Now I might think, yeah, it's okay, but I'm not too keen on the colors. In fact, I'm not really happy with any of those colors that are up there. Let's load an entirely different spool library. So I'll double click on this button that says more colors. When I do that, this tells me that the Good Rod nylon library is loaded. Let's load something else. I could choose the ProWrap nylon color fast library, or the NURB shade pack, or the Madeira in order library. Let's, for argument's sake, let's choose the NURBS shade pack. Do I want to clear the ones that are in there? I can choose yes or no. It won't affect the original libraries. I'm just going to say yes. Okay, so it takes a few seconds to load that, but it now gives us at our disposal the selection of all of these different colors taken from the NURB shade packs. So what we do is, at the moment, we are using spools 1, 6, and 8. And I can confirm that by looking in the script, because it tells me this spool is 1, and this spool is 6, and this spool is 8. So let's change spool 1 to be something, I don't know, something on the purple side of things, something sort of lightish, mid-range purple, violet 3. So I double click on that. So spool 1 is now violet 3. If I hit wrap, it has changed it to violet 3. Spool, what was the other spool? 6. Let's change that to a really dark violet, or violet 5. Violet 5. Let's change that. And now let's change spool 8, which is this yellow at the moment. Let's change that to a really pale violet. Violet 1. So there I've changed the colors in my wrap by selecting different spools that have been used.
That's one of the best features about it, is you can just go click, 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 change the colors, and you don't have to sit there and waste 3 to 4 hours and go, I hate this. You can actually see it.
Sure. And I'll just turn on my camera for a second. So one thing I'll show you too, when I I help lots of people install VisualWRAP on their system. I mean, VisualWRAP was launched 20 years ago, and the code hasn't changed. Windows has changed, however. So I offer the service. When you buy the software, I'm quite happy to log into your machine remotely and to do the installation on your behalf. So it normally takes 15 to 20 minutes, depending on how strong the internet connection is. But there's a set series of steps I do just to make sure things are set up right. One of those things is I make sure the color libraries are loaded properly. I make sure that either the standard or the additional pattern packs are loaded if you've bought the additional pattern packs. I also set the thread width depending on your screen. So what I'll demonstrate that again by going back to the screen. I'll probably never go back to this pattern, but let me just save it anyway. So we call this the sample violet pattern. When you first load VisualWRAP on your screen, the software does not know basically how good your monitor is and how thick or thin it wants to draw pixels on the screen. So that was one of the early obstacles I had to overcome. What I did is I built in a little bit of flexibility, like a fudge factor, so you can thicken or make threads thinner. A good way of checking is, I don't want to save this, I do want to clear it. I go to the standard pattern library and I load the American flag pattern. I'll go down to a single repeat. That's a nice solid background and there's no gaps in the threads. If I go into my preferences, here's where a bunch of saved settings are kept. You can see on my system, the flat view window has been set to a thickness of 3. The 3 doesn't actually mean anything other than if you're a coder, but basically you can select a really skinny thread or a really thick thread or 2 intermediate threads. By default, it loads onto your system with size 2. So if I say OK, I'll hit apply on that. When I hit wrap, say OK, it wants to close the window. I hit clear and wrap. Don't know if you can see it. There's a little gap there. It'll be more obvious if I go back into preferences and make it the thinnest. That's super thin threads, and all I can see is gaps. So it needs someone with Mary's long fingernails to pack that tightly. So if I go to preferences and make it a bit thicker, by default it loads as 2. That's not too bad. On some systems, when I do that, I see that there's quite some significant gaps. You'll see like a little gap in the background here that repeats itself. I can see that little gap in the blue. So I'll just increase the thickness until I stop seeing that gap. Okay. And so far, every system I've seen, if you select between 1 and 4, you will close that gap. Okay.
So David wants to know what the word band means in the syntax.
Sure. Basically, it's a set of threads. So if we go new, I don't want to save this. I do want to clear it. I'll just use the default names for everything. If I pick I'll pick a single thread. I'll make it something that's easier to see while I'm demonstrating. I'll clear what's there. I'll make this move. Doesn't matter how I make it move. I'm only going to make a single pass, but I'm going to use a band of 5. When I say append, I'm telling the software only lay this pass, one single pass of this layout, but the layout consists of a band of 5. So when I hit wrap, that is considered a single pass because we've told it on each pass, use a band of 5. It's basically 5 threads side by side that you've wrapped sort of all at the same time. Maybe you do it one by one. Maybe you do it as a band, depending on how skillful you are with handling threads. But that's what I mean by a band. So, for example, carrying on with that, if I make 4 passes with 5 threads each, it's going to be a total of 20 threads. So if I replace what's there, let's at the same time do a, I'll just pick a better color that's easier to see, the red. Let's do a band going the other way of 5 passes. Sorry, a band of 5 with 4 passes. And we hit append. So if I clear that and go delay and wrap. So it does 5 of one, 5 of the other, 5 of one, 5 of the other, because it's a band of 5 followed by a band of 5. And in that way, you get some of these subtle features in your pattern, such as jagged edges, because instead of a single thread meeting a single thread, you've got a band of 4, which is covering up another band of 4. And so you end up with this sawtooth interface. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense.
He said, are the threads intended to be laid separately or together?
Okay. So in the case of laying a band, if I laid sort of 1 thread separately, 2 threads separately, 3 threads, 4 threads, 5 threads separately, it's the same as laying 5 threads all at once. But bear in mind, if you do lay it in bands, you'll end up with this jagged pattern where the threads interfere or cross over. So if you lay it one at a time and do basically a band of 1 followed by a band of 1, then another band of 1 followed by another band of 1, you'll end up with a nice smooth line. So it depends on what sort of effect in your pattern you're trying to achieve. Okay. So I feel like I'm talking everyone's ears off, but I'm hoping that it's hitting the mark and people are happy with the pace that I'm going at. If you want me to slow down or speed up, I will. What I thought I would do next is to pick a pattern, set it up, print it out true to size, and go through the steps of how to print it out true to size and do the layouts on my rod. So if there are no objections, that's what I'll do.
I dig it. David said thank you.
No worries. So I'll go back to my screen. So what I'm going to do is select CRTA 41. Custom rod thread art 41. I don't want to save the current one. I do wish to clear the current one. Okay, so we're in the standard pattern library. I'm just going to go to one I picked out before, CRTA 41, triangles. So that's the pattern. So I might think to myself, do I want lots of pattern repeats or do I want just a couple of pattern repeats? So by being able to print it out true to size, within about 2 minutes, I can put it against my rod and I can tell you whether it's going to look like it's in proportion or not. So I'll just swap cameras and have a look at, this is basically a skinny little blank that I'm going to use to demonstrate putting the wrap onto. So I'm going to imagine that my pattern is going to appear above this foregrip. So it's going to appear in this region. And I know it's a reasonably small rod, it's a small diameter rod, so it's probably going to look okay with, you know, a reasonably long wrap length. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a guess and I'm going to say, I'll go back to my PC screen. I'm going to take a guess and say, I think 5 pattern repeats are going to look good on my rod. I'd like to print that out true to size and test that assumption. So the way you do that is you set up the pattern with the colors you want and the repeats that you want, like I've just done. And then you go to what's called the taper view window. There are 2 ways of getting to that. You can go to window taper, or you can go to this button, which is meant to look like a tapered rod with some layout marks on it. So when I go to the taper view window, what it does is it shows an assumed taper on your rod because your butt diameter is larger than your tip diameter, and it adjusts the pattern accordingly. Before we get stuck into it, you might see that there's some almost random lines appearing there. They are not part of the pattern. In fact, they are it's an artifact that's created again by the fact that each monitor that this VisualWRAP is used on has a different screen resolution, and I can't guarantee that your monitor will have the same resolution as mine. So anytime you see those annoying little lines, just double click on the taper view and up comes this little screen, and just make that number either bigger or smaller to adjust it. Doesn't matter what the number means, it's just a fudge factor. But by doing that and saying okay, basically next time you set up 5 pattern repeats on your computer, VisualWRAP will use that fudge factor to make those lines disappear. So getting back to the task at hand, we want to size this to suit our rod. And it's asking for 2 measurements. It's asking for the butt diameter, so it's the diameter at this end, and also the tip diameter, the diameter at this end. Up front, I'll say it's working in millimeters, so bear that in mind. And it's the diameter, so it's the measurement taken with a set of calipers. The challenge about asking for a butt diameter and a tip diameter is you're not quite sure how long the wrap is going to be until you put your diameters in. It's a bit of a circular problem. You set up your diameters, it changes your wrap length. If you want a different wrap length, then it changes your diameters. It changes where to measure those diameters. So I'll show you a trick. And this isn't documented in the help file, so it's good to know. If I look at this, I will go to my rod and say to myself, I'm going to put the pattern in the vicinity of this area. So let's take a measurement in the middle. So let's take a measurement about here. So I'm going to, quite where that pencil is more or less. Let's take, using my calipers, let's measure the diameter at that place. So hopefully you can see what I'm doing. I use my calipers, I take a measurement, and it tells me the diameter is, I mean, this is only approximate for the demonstration, 8.3 millimeters in that middle area. Okay, 8.3 millimeters, remember that number. Go back to my screen, and where it says butt diameter, I'll put 8.3. Where it says tip diameter, I'll put 8.3. And then I'll hit refresh. And then what that tells me is if your diameter in the middle is 8.3, basically, and you've got no taper on it, your wrap length is going to be 130. Okay, so we know that wrap length is 130. Remember that number, 130. So if we go back to here, if we said our, hopefully you can see that, our pattern was going to start roughly there, and we're going to go approximately 130. I'm going to do this with my left hand, so if it falls off, please forgive me. 130. So if that's my wrap length, we know that the middle diameter is approximately correct because that's where we measured it. Now let's take actual measurements at the butt and tip. So at the butt, it's 9.08. So we'll say 9.1. Just let me write that down. 9.1. 9.1. And then at the tip, we'll take an equivalent measurement. And it's saying 7.7. 7.7. 7.7. Okay. Let's go back to the computer screen and punch those numbers in. So what do we say at the butt? We said 9.1. 9.1. At the tip, we said 7.7. Now, if I was accurate enough where I started measuring from, that wrap length shouldn't really change. So when I hit refresh, it's changed a little bit, changed by about 1 millimeter, but it's close enough for this demonstration. This is now sized to that area on my rod, and I'd like to print that. So what I do is I hit the print button, and it asks me which printer do I want to use. So if I hit print, that should hopefully kick my desktop printer into life. You can hear that in the background. That's the printer doing its thing. Okay.
So with printing it out like this, Dave, like, does this kind of skip the whole having to find the centers of everything because you've kind of just, here it is, this is where it should fit, this is how it should work. We don't have to worry about.
What it's attempting to do is avoid you having to use a tape measure or a ruler to determine where your centers are. So
dig it. Okay.
So this is the printout that I've made. It's the 5 pattern repeats. If you can see that on this side, you can see that there's, if you can see it, it's a little bit thinner where my finger is than the other side, showing that it's tapered. So if I was to cut that out and wrap it around the rod, it has worked out exactly the size this flat pattern needs to be in order to fit perfectly around your rod. So with that in mind, I'll go back to the overhead camera. Let's now transfer those measurements onto the rod, and I'll make myself a bit of space before I knock everything off the table. You can see what I'm doing. What I'm going to do is I'll make a fold across the center of that. I'll try to do it in camera so you can see what I'm doing, but I'm a bit clumsy, so we'll see. We basically need to fold it across. I mean, it pays to be accurate at this stage. The most important marks you're going to make on your blank, in my opinion, are the layout marks for your cross wrap pattern, because if you get those wrong, then you're always going to be fighting against things not closing and the pattern not looking right. And so get your layout marks right. So now what you can see, yep, that's where it starts because it's where you took the measurement. This is where it finishes, so we took the measurement. So rather than using a tape measure, and hopefully you can see past my fat fingers, I would, hang on, I need 3 hands. Can anyone lend me a hand? Hang on.
I can't really use mine.
So basically I'm going to make a mark there, a mark there, a mark there, a mark there. I mean, you get the message, you get the idea. And a mark there. And then if you use something like the circle template, Mary, that you promote for marking the opposite end of the axis, if you put your circle template on there, and that told you that the opposite axis was like there, for example, and you were able to carry the starting point around, knowing that that's where the axis should be, I would then lay out the other axis by folding along either the top or the bottom of that pattern. So I've just done another fold. This time it's along the top axis, and I would use that to mark out that point, that point, that point, that point, and that one. I'll just make those a bit darker so you can see them.
So Lori said that with a good printer, you could make stickers, no need to wrap with thread.
That's been suggested in the past, and it's known as heresy in our circle.
It's blasphemy.
Blasphemy.
So in theory, you could just, okay, so we pick a pattern, right? And this was, what was it? The CRT numbers. It looks like Windows in the book, but you could just print out your layout threads. Yeah.
That is right. And so I'm glad you mentioned that. So let me show you another option. I come back here. Anything that's shown in the flat view gets sent to the taper view in the same way that anything that's shown in the flat view gets sent to the 3D view. When we're setting up our pattern, we've got, see these two options here? We've got all threads or layouts only.
Mm-hmm.
So if I click layouts only and go clear, wrap, that has just laid out the layout threads. So then when I go to my taper view window, I can print that out. That shows me exactly where the layout threads should be.
Is this foolproof?
Say again, sorry?
Is this foolproof? Like, okay, we go in here, we pick this, we get the layout threads, we print it out, we start all our marks and stuff. Like, it's with the program, it knows how, like, the circumference of that rod, like, versus passes. So, like, if we're going to a larger sized rod, like something that's like 20 millimeters for, you know, shits and giggles, or you're going to something that's like 5 millimeters, like, if it printing out, is it going to be able to accommodate the spacing, or like, instead of spacing it for 7, like, where's the limitation to it?
Okay.
If that makes sense.
So long as the taper on your blank is a regular taper, so it's linear. So as long as it's not sort of like some loopy taper, that I don't think there are any blanks that don't taper linearly. The assumption that's made in the code is that it tapers evenly from the butt end to the tip end in the vicinity of the wrap. Based on that, the mathematics doesn't lie. It will always create the right sized pattern. But what the limitation might be is you might choose a ridiculous number of repeats. You might choose 10 repeats, which is the most that the software can handle. If you try to print that out, it probably is not going to fit on your paper. So that is a limitation. If it's a square pattern, in that case, I would then go to my spacing table and use the numbers. But even though I'm a numbers guy, I don't like working with numbers, so I'd much prefer to do it graphically and print it out. But if it's too big to accommodate the paper you've got, then that will be a challenge. Now, I have to admit, there is a bug in VisualWRAP. If you come in here and you realize, hang on, I won't be able to print this out in portrait orientation. I need to print it out in landscape orientation. You can't do that from this print button, even though you think you can. So if you go to print, and if I go to printer and go preferences, that will give me a selection to change from portrait to landscape. I click OK. When I hit print again, VisualWRAP just ignores that setting. So that's a bug. What you need to do is you need to go into Windows. I think it's like devices. Is it devices, printers, or printers and scanners? You need to find your printer. Does it manage it? Printer properties and device. Is it device settings? There's a way of changing it from portrait. Is it preferences? Portrait. There you go. Portrait to landscape. If you make the setting there, click OK and print it. Let's do it. Don't take my word for it. Let's do it. Let's say OK. So I've changed it. I've changed it from within Windows. I go back. Let's now print this like so. Our printer is jumping into life. What it's done, hang on. Because my table view is blank, I hadn't hit refresh. Right, let me print that, because it basically printed a blank because the table view is blank. So I've hit print again. So hot off the press, we have it printed in landscape orientation. Probably, how many pattern repeats have we got in there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It just fits it in. It's just taken the edge off the end, but that's how it's done.
Bonnie's asking about ice rods. If you could print it out for ice rods.
Well, if your ice rod has got a really skinny diameter, you can put a really skinny, really small number in there. It's the same principle. And then when if I hit print on that, we'll see what that looks like.
This generally takes out the guesswork as far as, it's kind of like you print it and you've got your centers, you've got your, oh, look how tiny it is. That's cute.
Yeah. So that's.
Okay, go score one for VisualWRAP.
I forgot to swap the screen over, but basically for the ice rod, I set the butt diameter to be 4 and the tip diameter to be 3 compared to what it was before, and that's how it's adjusted. But yeah, it's smart enough to do the calculations and adjust that to suit your rod. So after I've made my layouts, typically what I like to do is take my scissors. I'll go to the overhead camera there, and basically
we're making a sticker.
Please do not use the S word in my company. Right.
That's what I tell people at the shows. Unfriend me. Oh, everybody's talking about unfriending me and blocking me anyways, because apparently I make them buy thread. So you can join the Hate on Mary Club right now.
Right. So what you can do is you can take the end off it.
Literally print a version of what it could look like on the rod.
It is. And so basically
it's the same.
It's a bit hard to see it, but that's what it's going to look like. And what I was saying before is I guessed that 5 pattern repeats was going to look okay. And so I'll swap to the other camera. What this tells me is, you know, when I hold it up, do I think, you know, based on the size of that rod and the proportion of the pattern, is 5 enough, or should it be a bit longer, 7, or should it be a bit less, 3? Very quickly, I can change the number of pattern repeats in VisualWRAP, print it out again, and try it. I can also try it with different colors, you know, all of the above.
Awesome. I'm not utilizing VisualWRAP to its full potential at all. I'm just going in, looking at patterns, clicking colors, and going on and doing the hard way. Awesome. Bravo, sir. Bravo.
So, what haven't I covered? I've spoken about changing colors. I've spoken about changing thread libraries. We've set up a flat. Oh, I know. Something else we can do. Let's pick a pattern that has a lot of sections in it.
Jose said that is actually a cool way to use it that way. That is actually cool to use it that way. I agree, Jose. I never even tried it.
So bear with me for a second as I find an appropriate. Okay, let's try this one. Custom rod thread art 33. So if we open, I don't want to save it. Yes, I want to clear it. If we go to standard patterns, CRTA, find 33, it's a fish.
While you're looking for that, Mike Ward wants to know, is there a way to get the layout threads in addition to the centers without printing, like the spacing measurements for the layout?
Without printing. Are we talking about using this spacing window? I mean, that's the spacing tells you where the centers are going to be, with the proviso that it's a square pattern and the layout centers are in the middle of the square.
Yeah. So he's also asking, like, getting the centers, which you could get from those numbers easily, but also the pattern spacing. So, like, if it was 7 passes, it was supposed to be 2 millimeters for that technical pattern from A to B, however you want to look at it. Can they get it without having to print?
Not without having to print. No. The thing about VisualWRAP is it knows where to start and stop threads, and it knows where to start and stop bands of thread. And when you print that out, you can take a measurement. But the thing is, and this is, I'm glad this question's come up actually. The thing is, one thread on the screen is not necessarily one thread on your rod. Like I said right at the beginning, I've set up a grid pattern of 100 by 100. So in software world, I can fit 100 threads across a single pattern repeat. But in real rod making world, I mean, am I using A thread, C thread, D thread? Am I wrapping with intensely tight pressure? Am I doing it really loose? There's various different parameters that I can't characterize in the software. So all I can do is I can accurately say where things start and stop, and then I can scale the output image to suit the size of the rod. Then by taking actual measurements from that output image is how you would tell, I guess, thicknesses of bands, if that answers the question.
It makes sense.
Okay, right. So with this pattern, if we wrap all threads, this is a fish pattern. So it has multiple sections. The first section is the head, then there's the body, and there's the tail, and there's a background. So we know we can either wrap all the threads or we can wrap the layouts only. But the cool thing about using sections and organizing your pattern using sections is you can then filter those sections out. So at the moment, we're wrapping the head and the body and the tail and the background. So by hitting the scope button, raises this pattern section window. I could choose to, what does it look like if I only wrap the body? And I say wrap, that's only wrapping the body. I can go back into scope and say, what if I want just the body and the head? Say, okay, there you go. That's the body and the head only. So if your pattern has multiple sections in it, then using the scope filter is a good way of limiting some or all of the sections just to help you as you work through. And by doing so, you might actually come up with a new variation on a pattern that you hadn't even realized simply by limiting what you've already written or what's already there. Okay.
I'm learning all kinds of stuff tonight. I don't know about anybody else, but I didn't know about half that stuff. Yay. All right, guys. What kind of questions do you have? What do you want to see? I know one that I get asked about it, other than the pattern spacing, which you kind of basically have gone over that. We can literally put it on there, put your information on the rod, print it, and it's going to tell you what's going to fit. How do you get an idea for like multiple axis? I know that there's a few in the pattern packs, like the chevrons is loaded in there, the faux scales. How do they start trying to code those axes, if that makes sense? So like going from a 2 to just a 4 for simplistic.
Yeah. And it would be really nice if there was simply a feature in there that says, okay, this is a 2-axis or a standard pattern. Let's turn it into a 4 by just clicking this button.
Right.
Not as easy as that, unfortunately, because like cross wraps can get really complicated really quickly because everything you lay down interferes with everything else that you lay down over the top of it. So you get all these side patterns and you get basically all this interference happening. So you basically have to think like a cross wrap while you're making your script. There's no easy way of doing it other than understanding how to write script and seeing the effect of putting, you know, a new line here or a new line there and seeing how changing a coordinate affects the rest of the pattern. Because it would be great to take a single pattern. Well, let's do it in real life rather than listen to me blabber on. It would be great if we had well, let me try to combine two patterns and you'll therefore see some of the challenge we've got. Say we had I don't wish to save, I do wish to clear. Say we had the first pattern, which was 41, customized thread art 41. So we've got this nice pattern and we might think, okay, that's nice, but it's just begging to have another pattern put in there. It would be great if it was like a sticker or a decal and we could just insert a pattern there and 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 there, and we'd end up with a nice sort of combination of two patterns. That would be nice. Unfortunately, what we find is as we wrap this second pattern, I mean, if we wrap the first pattern first and then afterwards add the next pattern, as we're wrapping that next pattern, it will start to cross over the first pattern and start to obliterate it. So we sort of have to wrap them at the same time. So I'll show you an example, and I'll tell you up front, the example will be a fail, but it's to demonstrate how challenging it can become. So this is one pattern. Let's at the same time look at another pattern. And to do that, I'm going to launch a second instance of VisualWRAP. So I'll have two versions of VisualWRAP open at the same time. Okay, so in the second VisualWRAP, I'm going to open up custom rod thread art 11. So I'll go open, standard, CRTA 11. Okay, wrap. Okay, so wouldn't it be nice if we could insert these stars everywhere there's a blank between those patterns?
Mm-hmm.
So you might think, okay, can I just add that script to this script? Well, for starters, this script is centered. I mean, in a single repeat, it is centered in that single repeat, and in the same way, if I did a single repeat of this one and wrap that, it is also centered. So if I simply added this second star script to this first star script, it's going to just wrap over the top. So what I need to do is I need to offset this by like 50. And let me say up front, this is going to get complicated, and it's not designed to put anyone off, but it's just designed to demonstrate the real life challenges we have trying to think like a cross wrap. So
blame me. I was the one asking the complicated question.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mary.
It's always me.
There's always one in every crowd. In every Facebook Live, there's always one. So let's offset this pattern by 50, and let's do that over here. Now it's actually the combination of two boxes. So 43 plus 50 becomes 93, and 40 plus 50 becomes 90. If the other side of the box, because that was the dimensions or the coordinates of the first box, the other side of the box is at 57 and 60. If I add 50 to that, 57 will become 107, but VisualWRAP works on a grid of 0 to 100. Everything past 100 becomes 0 again, or starts again at 1. So 50 plus 57 is 107, but take 100 off that, it becomes 7. And then 60 plus 50 is 110. So let's make that 10. 10. Let's ignore the background for a minute. And another trick, if you're a coding sort of person, is to put a comment symbol, which is an exclamation mark, in front of a script line that you want to be ignored, and that will turn it green, which will ignore it. So if I clear and wrap that, it's now offset that pattern by 50. So if I was to increase the number of repeats, it's now put the pattern where I want it. Now, wouldn't it be great if I could just copy this script? So I'm going to highlight the actual script which creates this pattern. I'm going to right click and say copy, and then go back to the original VisualWRAP and say, let's add those lines of script after these two lines of script. So if we go, I'm going to go right click paste. So these two lines were from the orange and red star, and these two lines are from this black and white pattern. So because these two are in the same sequence, it's going to start wrapping this pattern, but at the same time, it's also going to start wrapping the second pattern. So if we go clear, I'll put 2 repeats. I'll put it in single mode.
Wouldn't you need to change the spool color on one of them, though?
You could do that, yes. So, for example, rather than use 3 and 1, let's use 3 and 4. 3 and 4, which means instead of an orange and black, it'll be an orange and brown for the second star pattern. And let's do the same thing here. What was 8 and 1? Let's make that, I'll keep that as 8. but make the 1 a 4. I hope I haven't messed that up. Anyway. So now when I hit wrap, so what does it start doing? It starts wrapping the first pattern. Okay.
Whoa.
That was a spoiler. Let me clear that. Spoiler alert, he's just hit auto. Let's change the rod color to something contrasting just so you can see it when it wraps a white thread and you don't have to guess what's going on. So now when I hit clear, the rod is selected as gray. Therefore, when I hit clear, it shows you the rod. Let's put it in single mode. We'll hit wrap. We'll go next. Okay. So when we start wrapping, it starts wrapping the first pattern, which we're familiar with. Okay. So it started off on the right track. And now we're expecting it to start putting threads in this gap because that's what we've told it to do. So we go next, 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 next. So, yep, it's so far, so good. We're happy with that. So it's done one pass of the first pattern and one pass of the second pattern. But what it's also doing is the first pattern is starting to already interfere and go over the top. Well, this pattern is starting to go over the top of the first pattern. So, I mean, almost immediately, the two patterns are interfering with each other and fighting with each other for who should be seen by the human eye, who is on top and who is on bottom. So as I keep wrapping, it'll go back to the first pattern again, and then it'll go on to the next pattern. It'll go on to the first pattern again. It'll go on to the next pattern. So it's, in some ways, it's trying to do what we told it to do. It's trying to wrap the first pattern at the same time as the second pattern, but because of the sizing, the relative sizing between the two patterns, this side pattern or this interference pattern is starting to overwhelm everything else. And I mean, there's no easy way I can tell it to do otherwise. So we'll probably get 3/4 of the way through and things will be okay. We'll probably get to about there, but now that we're there, the first pattern will start to destroy the second pattern, and then the second pattern will try to fight back, and in the end, who wins?
So you would basically have to like run through it to where they start to like hit each other and then pick the secondary pattern and like shrink it based on where it needs to stop.
Yeah, so you've basically got to think, you've got to actually understand what's going on, and that's the challenge. At least being able to visualize it, you can see what's going on and work out, well, that was a fail because this was too big. So you can tweak the numbers and try again. Well, that was a fail because it started in the wrong place. You can keep tweaking the numbers and hopefully eventually get there. And I mean, there are many people out there that are much more skilled at cross-wrapping than I am. I mean, Laurie is one of them. Mary, you're another one of them. Mike, you're another one as well. You might be able to offer better suggestions on how to plan for a multiple axis wrap or a double pattern. What we've ended up with is nothing like what we originally planned to do. Obviously, I did not turn off the background. So I could have turned off the background, which would have stopped the first pattern totally obliterating the second pattern. But we can see that the two patterns interfere and we've ended up with some Frankenstein pattern now. It's not what we intended.
What if you just stuck if you got rid of the 4-point star and we just stuck a simple, like built it into the script, diamond.
Right.
As that secondary pattern, because then we can control how big or small it gets. Because, I mean, for me, as far as coding is going to be concerned, I'm going to start with the most simplest thing and then kind of work my way up to the more complicated stuff.
Sure. So what if we started with okay, let's just do a light blue diamond that starts, well, it's going to be in the middle, so it's going to be 50, halfway down. and across it's going to be at, basically it's going to start at 0, which is the same as starting at 100. We'll go outwards and we'll make, how many passes are in this one? There's 7 passes in the first pattern. However, the second line is a +1. So
yeah.
Let's put 7 passes and just see what happens. It'll be a fail, but might be a happy little accident. We'll see what happens. So we'll go here and we will insert that. Did that go where I thought it would need it to go? I don't think so. I don't know. I'm just going to copy that. I'm going Control-C, or I'm going copy. That's the good thing about this. This is a text editor. This is all text. You can edit it. You can copy it. You can paste it. Do all those good things. So now, if I go clear, single mode, wrap. Okay, let's go next. So this is pattern number 1. That blue is really hard to see, isn't it?
It'll stand out on the white background, though.
Okay, first pattern, second pattern. Back to first pattern, second pattern, first pattern. And we're already getting into this +1 is starting to overwhelm the real estate that the blue sort of diamond is trying to use. First pattern. Second pattern. And yeah, before we know it, we haven't even finished the first pattern and the second pattern is already starting to get obliterated.
That looks cool.
Software people and coders are inherently lazy. So we love these loops. We love saying, 7 passes or 10 passes, and it goes around and around 7 times and repeats what it was done before. It is possible to, I guess, explode this line of script into 7 individual lines of script and place individual threads down. And you might find that, well, rather than starting this second blue pattern at the same time as starting the first black and white pattern, it might pay to start it halfway through wrapping the first pattern. You can get into any amount of complexity working with scripts and trying to work out the best way to code it to end up with a result that's pleasing to the eye.
As far as spool colors are concerned, are you limited to 8, or are there more than 8 colors available?
Glad you asked. So by default, there are 8. But also we have, and like I was saying before, coders are inherently lazy. So rather than coming up with a new way of coding or setting up colors for a grip, a rod, and an end wrap, and there's even one more. If we go into preferences, because by default, these may not all be seen. So if going to my preferences window and going on to wrapping, I can click use an under wrap. When I say OK, suddenly you have this under wrap color appears as well. So in the background, you've got spools 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So in that case, if we said rather than, let's just blank out the pattern that we added, make sure that's there. Okay, so we're back to a healthy pattern that was using spool 1. Let's use spool 11 instead of spool 1. So 1 becomes 11, 1 becomes 11.
Hal says he's even more confused than ever. Hal, this particular section is like the more complicated stuff. If you understood everything we were talking about up until this point, then you're good. Okay.
Yeah, My head is actually spinning at the moment, Hal, too, so don't be too put off by that.
We need to do a part 2, the more advanced.
Yeah,
stuff.
and that's the challenge of trying to boil the ocean. We try to provide basic instruction as well as super advanced instruction. We inevitably disappoint half of the audience. So just bear in mind that you can always ask questions, send me a message, post something on the VisualWRAP users group on Facebook. There's we're a community of people who really want to help, and I mean we're in it because we love what we do. I don't know about you, but I'm fascinated by cross-wraps. I don't know what it is about them, but to me they're just awesome, absolutely awesome. So I'm happy to help. Obviously I get busy from time to time, and it's a little bit challenging, finding enough hours in the day to do my day job and the night job and be a dad as well. So sometimes I might be a bit slow in coming back to you, but never be shy about asking questions. Right. Anything else, or have I talked your ear off?
I can say that nobody else has asked anything, but Hal did said,
is what I'd say.
Yeah, Hal was like, "Who said I understood it in the beginning?" Go back and rewatch it, Hal. I promise it will make sense. Promise. Let's see. Anybody else? I know a lot of people are kicking out because my time it's about 10 o'clock, and I know most people are trying to go to bed.
Yeah, it's right.
Which
I mean, we like you said, we can do a second session at some stage, and if people want to send through questions on specific target areas, I can prepare for those specific questions, and that might help hit the mark a little better.
Yeah, well, I can tell you if we do a second one, it's the more advanced one. We're going to have to talk about this exploding the pattern that you just mentioned casually, like everybody understands that. Because I know what you're saying, but I wouldn't know how to actually put it into the thing. But I do feel like that's a more advanced kind of topic. Let's see. Make sure everything's keeping up. So for us, I know that, while Herb said he understands more than before. Awesome. Awesome. Cool. Don't y'all start barking. Shh. Thank you for what you did show. I learned a couple of things I didn't know and tools that will help. That was from Dakota. Mike says, great info, Dave. Shh. You're fine. There's nothing out there. You're fine.
Very good. Like I say, yeah, if you do have more questions, it's David Boyle at VisualWRAP.com. It's the Facebook users group. It's the VisualWRAP users group on Facebook. And I'm sure if you post a message on Southern, you'll get directed in the right direction, or even on Nerves, you'll get directed appropriately. And happy to help where I can.
Kevin Flay said, I only have recently started to do chevrons and other decorative wraps. It seems that the program is a way to make the process more foolproof. Yes?
That's the idea. It's designed to be visual. It's designed to let you quickly see what's going on. And that then helps you make decisions about, have I got the right colors? Have I got the right number of pattern repeats? When I lay it out on my rod, because it's visual, I can simply mark off against the pattern rather than using a tape measure and picking the wrong number and being halfway through the wrap before you realize things are off. So it's designed to be foolproof, but what do they say? Never underestimate the total ingenuity of fools. So it's impossible to be foolproof, and everyone learns in a different way. Everyone thinks about things in a different manner. Some people are visual, some people are more analytical, some people can only learn if it's demonstrated to them. And that's been a big learning for me. I thought everyone learnt like me when I was writing it, and I thought, I've written a help file. People can read that help file, think like an engineer, and they're set. Nothing more to it. and it's only taken me probably 19 years to get it through my thick skull that's not everyone's an engineer or thinks like an engineer. So yeah, I'm a slow learner there. So yeah, it is designed obviously to help you build better rods and also help you work with customers. I mean, if you have the pattern printouts, if you have the these and you want to send screenshots to your customer and say, you know, do you like this pattern or do you like this pattern, you know, and because it's visual, they don't have to guess. And if they say, well, I'd like that, but I'd like it in blue rather than yellow, well, if you're familiar enough with the software, you should be able to quickly change spool 3 from blue to yellow and do a quick screenshot and email it back to them. And they'll realize, yep, this person knows what I want, and yep, I'll have a rod built with that, please. So hopefully it is a useful tool. I've had a lot of good feedback over the years. I've also had a lot of feedback about how confusing scripts can be. I accept that it's not everyone's cup of tea. If I had a way of simplifying it even further, I would. I am working on version 2 of the software. It is a challenge. There's been lots of learnings in the last 20 years, as you would expect, and we've uncovered 1 or 2 bugs. 1 or 2 in 20 years isn't too bad, I think. But you know, we will end up launching version 2. I'm not committing to any date, but it will happen.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear. Yeah, well, just the fact that you tonight clarified some stuff that I was just skipping over because I was like, I just go in there, look at the patterns, I flip some colors around and go, yeah, I'm going to use that. Well, now I can literally just print it out and stick it on there and be like, here's my measurements, centers, spacing, bam, bam, thank you, ma'am. We're going. So
one thing that I always thought would be cool that I've never done is when you print out a pattern, if someone had like an embroidery machine, imagine if you had like a cloth rod bag that you embroidered the actual cross wrap pattern that you've got on the rod on the bag in thread. How cool would that be? How customized would that be? An embroidered pattern on your cloth rod bag that matches the pattern on the rod.
That's actually pretty awesome. That's kind of like my cutoffs, turning them into bracelets kind of thing. Here now you got to wrap one to go for that. That's, look at you, Dave. You're smart. Mike said that said like a true software engineer.
Well, Mike, I think you would know, wouldn't you?
Right.
Very good.
Oh man. Lori says, or a sticker. She's on the sticker kick tonight.
Yeah, no stickers.
That's what I tell people when they come up to me. Is that thread? Nah, it's just stickers.
But having said that, if you can come up with, well, print your layout threads on a clear decal and put your decal with the layout threads on your rod and then just wrap over the top of it. I mean, that's the concept of wrap sticks. So I would condone using a sticker in that sort of situation. Yeah.
Well, explain the wrap sticks.
Wrap sticks, yeah. So I don't have one here that I can show you because we've just shuffled the whole house around to put new carpet in. And all my wrap sticks are downstairs. But instead of doing a practice wrap on a rod, imagine a length of dowel, and on that dowel, I've pre-printed basically the tapered layout so you can actually see where the threads are. And the idea is you use that dowel as a practice stick. And if I share my, let me see, if I share my screen, I should be able to navigate and show you what I mean if the site's not blocked. If I go to threadcentral.net, threadcentral.net.
It's covered up with thread.
And when that finally decides to open, and if I change my view to show you where I'm looking, and if I go to Mary, I'm going to make you smaller. I'm sorry. If I can manipulate this like so. Okay. So from here in Thread Central, if you search for wrap sticks, come on, you'll find that wrap sticks with a space. So that's what it looks like. It's a there's two options. You can buy the kit ready made, and you can see from the picture that I've basically got 3 sizes of dowel, and they've got layout threads printed on them already. If you can see that, it's probably a little bit hard to see because I'm not used to using this keyboard. That's me setting them up. And that's if you want to buy them pre-made. Alternatively, if you go back to Wrap Sticks, you can download the template yourself here. Doesn't cost anything. And basically it's a template. There's three sizes of template. You print it out depending on the size dowel you have. It's 1/4, 1/2, and is it 5/8? What you might find, and what I found through getting these ready, when you print it out, it might not be 100% able to wrap around the rod. It'll be slightly larger or slightly smaller. It's a PDF file. When you print it, you can just simply scale it by 1% here or there. You can scale it up by 1 or 2%, or scale it down by 1 or 2%, so that when you wrap it around your rod, this, where my mouse is there, lines up with that, and then it's almost a foolproof method of putting threads down, because you're going over the top of a template that's already there. To also assist, there's a QR code which points you to a video, and the video takes you through how to come up with this pattern by wrapping your threads over the top of those layouts. So it's just an idea to get people into cross-wrapping, lets them practice on a bit of dowel instead of messing up a nice blank, and it's a bit of fun.
Hal said, so David, using different size thread will change the layout, right?
Well, using a different size thread will probably change the number of passes that it takes to fill up. So, 10 passes of size D thread might take up twice the space as 10 passes of size A thread. If you're using the true to size printout to tell you where to start and stop bands of thread, well, you simply keep wrapping until you hit the end mark, telling you, yes, that band is now the right width. The software won't tell you how many passes to lay down, but it will tell you graphically where to start and stop the threads. The principle is the same, though, whether you're using A or C or D.
So the wrap sticks are geared towards like beginner friendly people that are just kind of testing the waters, seeing how they feel about it. Pretty real simple. Get in there, start doing it. You don't have to deal with taper. You're just following this guideline to get used to the motions of it and everything, right?
That's the idea, because what's one of the most common questions from newbies as they get into this? How do I start? And what's the most common answer? Oh, simply get a scrap piece of blank and start wrapping, or pick a blank and start wrapping, or pick a piece of PVC, or pick a dowel. And so straight away, I'm a newbie who's never done it before, and I'm thinking, oh, what happens if I choose PVC dowel instead of a PVC tube instead of a blank? Does it mean the packing is different? Oh, because you're full of questions as a newbie because you don't know what you don't know. The idea with Wrap Sticks is just start wrapping. Open up the kit, put it on either your lap or a hand wrapper or a lathe if you've got one, and start wrapping. Just start placing threads over the top of the template And lo and behold, within 10 passes, you're going to have a pattern starting to form. And hopefully you get bitten by that bug, which ignites that passion in your soul. Like I know it's bitten me, and it's bitten Mary, and it's bitten others. You know.
Dakota wants to know, with the second version, what will be different than the original?
Everything will be better. Let's just leave it at that.
It's the new upgraded version.
Well, I won't go into features, but it will be platform independent. So gone will be the days of it. You must have Windows to run it. Yeah. It'll be platform independent. So that's one major feature.
That's awesome.
No.
Okay, so we have talked about your program, how awesome it is. Everybody, in my opinion, should own it if you really are 100% like loving decorative wraps. How much does it cost?
Cost $100, $99.95.
It's cheap.
So in my opinion, it's worth it if you use it a few times, and it saves you 6 hours of having to cut off a wrap because you haven't sized it correctly, or you didn't realize that 6 passes was going to look terrible on your ice rod and it should have been 10 passes, that sort of thing. For me, what values your time? And I don't know about you, but I'm finding less and less hours in the day. Might just be that I'm getting older and, you know, yes. My brain isn't functioning like it used to. And anything that saves me time for me is worth money. So, yeah, that's to me the biggest advantage of the software is the time saving aspect.
Yes, I agree with that 100%. What about the pattern packs? How much do they cost?
Pattern packs on their own, if you buy an individual pattern pack, it's $30. If you buy the 4 pattern packs, it's $100. So there is a saving going to the 4. But wait, there's more. If you go to the bundle, what we've done is we've bundled VisualWRAP plus the 4 pattern packs for $160. So
yes,
you're basically getting a pretty good discount by going with the software plus the pattern packs. And I would say most people get most value out of the software by having the pattern packs. Like I said before, I thought by having a coding language in there, people would just fall over themselves writing their own scripts, and it hasn't happened because it's not people's cup of tea. But by having a wide selection of patterns and a good set of index files that you can quickly browse through and think, yep, I like the look of that one, find the number, open it up, quickly wrap it on the screen, change the colors, print it out true to size, put it on your rod. To me, it's the ultimate tool if you're dealing with cross wraps.
Dakota wants to know, for the people that have already bought VisualWRAP, will we have to pay for the second version, or will it just be an update?
Let's cross that bridge when we get there. It depends on a lot of things. Yeah.
He's still in the stages of making it, so let him sort through his.
And don't worry, if you've purchased the software recently, it will be supported, you know, for a long time. I've already supported the software for 20 years. It was launched in 2002. I started coding it in 1997. It was launched in 2002. I've supported it diligently for 21 years now, and I'm not about to leave anyone in the lurch. So I think anyone who's dealt with me understands I'm a straight up and down guy. I look after my customers. I like to help people. So have no fear that if you know, don't think, I'm going to hold off waiting for version 2, because it might be a long time coming. As I say, I've got a lot going on in my little life, and life often gets in the way in my case. So I wouldn't hold back. If you think it's something you're interested in, grab it, and then if and when version 2 comes out, there'll be a migration path. So rest assured there.
I know for you personally, I haven't known you for a long period of time, but in the time that I know you, I know that once you get your mindset on something, you're going to do it. So we know it'll be here. Just I'm not going to put a time frame on it.
Yeah. I'm not even going to estimate, because that sticks in people's minds, and it doesn't help anyone. Then just creates pressure and false expectations. So it'll take a long time. Yeah, I wouldn't expect it anytime soon. Yeah.
I can't imagine writing a program such like that. Like, that's just over my head completely. And I would think that most people like myself, when it comes to, we want to figure out wraps. You know, we've seen the same things over and over again. Now, y'all blow out those pattern packs, and we were just like, all these awesome new patterns, where it was just taking normal patterns and just modifying just a little bit. But us, we were going, okay, yeah, I like that one. I'd love to sit down and learn how to code it and come up with my own stuff. But the trial and error for me is where I don't have the time for it. So when you guys like sent out those pattern packs, you were like, hey, here's like 400 more freaking patterns. I was like, please give them to me. And I still haven't wrapped I'm not even halfway through all of them. So I think that's where most people got caught up, is like, they want to code it. They want to sit down and do it. But like you said, we just don't have the time if we don't have the coder's brain. And I know I don't. Math is not my thing. Math. Yeah. So let's see. Hold on. There's a bunch of people. Okay. So Scott, is the new version going to be Mac friendlier? Or will it require an emulator?
Yeah. Like I was saying, it will be platform independent. So it will run on a Mac. It'll run on a Windows machine. Should run on a Chromebook. It'll probably be browser based. So if you can run a browser, then you should be able to run the code. That's one of the first features, or one of the first requirements that has been set. So
Steve Harris. So when you said one pass on VisualWRAP doesn't necessarily mean one pass of thread, how do you judge how many passes of thread? Is it by how it looks or measurements from thread size?
Sure. So there's a couple of answers to that question, and it depends who you're asking. If you're asking someone like me, I would say print it out true to size, and that printout will tell you where to start and stop bands of thread. So it on the screen, it'll take 15 passes to get from here to there, and that will create a band of a certain width. When you print it out true to size and maybe mark that width on your blank, as you're wrapping it, it will take you 8, 9, 10, 12, 15, 17 passes, depending on size of thread and thread tension and how tightly you pack it afterwards. So that's my answer. If you ask someone like Billy, he would say, look in the spacing tables in my book, meaning Billy's book. So if you look in the Decorative Wraps book, at the back there's spacing tables, and it looks at standard sort of layouts for patterns. And if it's this sort of standard layout, then it recommends certain spacings and rules of thumb for sizes of thread. So there's a couple of different ways to look at that problem, depending on your sort of preference.
And kind of on that same note, so like VisualWRAP, we know it's a program, so it's based on its certain parameters. So as far as I know each pattern is going to be slightly different, but is there a standard kind of size blank that the program had in mind when you were writing it, where it had like 6 passes as a standard, 7 was the standard, or was it just however many threads were filling to make that pattern work?
No, it's however many threads we're filling. So, and that was one of the challenges. I mean, I tried to think of everything, and at the end of the day, what I can say is there are some limitations. 10 pattern repeats is a limitation in the software. If you want some insane number of repeats on your rod, then you won't be able to represent that on the screen if it's more than 10. But the mathematics holds true whether it's a skinny little ice blank or a big fat surf blank. The maths is the same. It just scales it to suit. That's about it. I mean, another limitation is that the 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 spool limitation that we have. In the version 2 of the software, we'll remove that limitation and make it more flexible so that you can add more different colors. I mean, I'll be honest, when I wrote this software, I didn't know any other rod builders. I had no one to bounce questions off. I didn't have a fantastic custom rod in my hand that I could look at and say, right, to achieve that result, I need these features. I had to use what I had in front of me. And what I had was custom rod thread art by Clemens. I had a rod building magazine by Ian Miller. about how to make a fishing rod that didn't even have any decorative stuff in there. And I had ideas in my head. So, you know, I did things as I guessed they should be and as I imagined they would be. And that's why I say it amazes me that 20 years later, it's actually still relevant because I think it means I must have guessed reasonably right.
You did.
And I guess case in point, as soon as the software was launched, I saw my first shaded wrap by someone. It was probably Billy or someone. I'd never seen a shaded wrap before, and it blew me away. And I thought I could have built that feature in, but I didn't know anyone. I didn't know anyone who did it. I didn't know what was happening at the time. There was no Facebook. There was no sharing of pictures easily.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
you know, we'll get there in version 2.
I mean, well, and then over the years, you've got people like Milt Durana and Billy and all these other people that do this coding and like Milt's patterns. I've seen a couple of the ones that he's written, and he sent me 1 or 2 to try. And I'm like, how did you take this code and just blow up all of these colors? He's got shading and everything in there. So it definitely can be done with your program. So you, like Lori said, you definitely were ahead of your time when you wrote the program. You just didn't see everything, but people have taken it and made it amazing. I mean, Billy did the rainbow fish. And he wrote the code for the wrap, and I just wrapped it. As I'm not into coding, obviously, but yeah, I think it's a great program. And if you're serious and you love decorative wraps, it's something that is a useful tool. 100%. Big fan.
Thank you. And I'm a big fan of Southern too. I mean, what you've done to attract a really nice group of people, it's fantastic. And I mean, all of these Facebook groups help in promoting the art and or the craft, and so it's really good to see it flourishing. And you know, Tom Kirkman says, you know, now is a golden age of rod building, and I think we can repeat that each year because we get new products and we get new techniques. People work on stuff in the background and come up with new ideas and start combining things. We see Stephanie, you know, combining saw blades with marbling, and suddenly it's almost like a whole new aspect of the craft. So things are developing. Let's keep it going, and don't be afraid to try. Is my advice.
Yeah,
I think you're great, Mary, at not being afraid to publish a fail. You know, you don't have to put a 110% perfect thing online all the time, and that's how people learn, and it shortens people's learning curve if they can stand on the shoulders of someone who's done it before. And that's how collaboration works.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how sharing works, and that's how cooperating works. So yeah, let's keep building the craft and growing this thing that we love.
Yeah, I personally do not mind sharing fails because I don't want people to like idolize the fact that I'm perfect. Like, I don't want people to, no person is perfect. We all screw up in some way, shape, or form. But for people that are just beginning, like, you know, I went into rod building. Nobody was talking about, you know, how to do decorative wraps. It was all just figure it out. You know, here you go. Here's a book. Here you go. Figure it out. And, you know, I did a lot of massive failing. I had a few people kind of just push me in the right direction. But then it was just like, okay, well, people started going, hey, you're awesome. You're doing all this cool stuff. And I'm like, I don't really know what I'm doing. So I just started posting all the fails because I needed people to understand that we all are going to fail, because fail is just the first attempt in learning. That's what it stands for. First attempt in learning. And you have to keep going. You have to keep pushing past it. And that's just, I feel like, obviously we love thread art. We love decorative wraps. That's kind of like that's our home. That's our little safe space where we're happy. But I'm also a big fan of like getting other people just to try other stuff, because I know in the time that I've been in it, which has been a lot shorter than you've been in it, you know, like 12 years for me, basically full time. I've seen a lot more double patterns popping up, people trying things that aren't, you know, normal, like Tom Kirkman over the last 10 years has put out that freeform wrap that didn't exist prior. Like, you know, and seeing all these changes makes me happy because we have to keep evolving it some way, shape, or form, because we don't want it to die out. We want custom rod building to continue on, kind of thing. So I appreciate having you on, Dave. We got to cut this thing short because I know we've been like 2 hours and 15 minutes at this point. And I know one of us is pretty tired. And I'm sure anybody coming back to watch this is going to be like, oh my God, this is a 2-hour episode.
Yeah.
We'll try to cut it down for like YouTube or something. I don't know. Maybe put it on Thread Central. But I really do appreciate you coming on and talking about it tonight, sharing your expertise. Everybody that was hanging out with us and talking. Mike says thread art is not a crime. Whoop, whoop. That is right. But seriously, thank you. And I appreciate it. And I'm sure that people that go back and watch it, whatever sections of it, and the people that were on, really do appreciate you coming on and taking the time out of your day to explain it to us on Wrap Wednesday. So
thank you very much. And thank you for the invite. Really appreciate it. And looking forward to the next one.
Yeah. We'll have to do an advanced one sometime later on where we talk about, you know, screwing up the code and seeing what happens kind of thing. And this is how patterns are born kind of thing. So, all right, guys, we're going to say goodnight because, you know, y'all need to go to bed. We need to go to bed, whatever the case may be. But once again, thank you for the support you guys have given me with the thread and being able to get to the expo and expand my whole teaching concept, which obviously Dave's a big fan of that as well because, you know, we're here teaching about VisualWRAP. But if you're not a member of his VisualWRAP group, check it out. Say it again, the actual name. It's VisualWRAP.
VisualWRAP Users Group.
VisualWRAP Users Group. It's on Facebook.
Yeah.
He answers questions, and you can reach him either through Messenger or David Boyle at VisualWRAP.com. And obviously, everything that he talked about tonight is at threadcentral.net. Okay? Love you. Y'all are awesome. Bye.
Take care, everyone. Goodbye.